It was a challenging week for those of us who rely on public transport and those who need to drive. The tube strike put a lot of pressure on many people this week. But on the other hand, I wish this will be the biggest problem in our lives. I wish this will be the hardest inconvenience we would have to deal with for the rest of our lives. When you put things in perspective, they sound not too bad. So at some point in this week's Torah portion, we read that people were commanded to take a basket and fill it with the first fruits, come to a priest and say this long passage. Arami oved ami. Right? My father was a wandering Aramean. And this phrase in Hebrew, this second word, oved, is a bit ambiguous, so we don't know exactly what's meant here. Oved means to be lost. My father was a lost Aramean, maybe. Or my father was an Aramean who got lost, maybe. But wandering is close enough, I think. And this is probably one of the phrases that puzzle rabbis and puzzle people. Who is this phrase referring to? Who is this Aramean? The most two obvious people are Abraham, who left the Aram, who left that place in Mesopotamia and moved to Canaan, or maybe Jacob, who went back there to find his love, or to find his partner, future, and spent 14 years there. So this long phrase, he went down to Egypt, right, with meager numbers and sojourned there, but there he became a great and populous nation. And here is the short version of our history, basically, or the story of the Torah. And then we were brought back from Egypt with a mighty hand and outstretched arm and awesome power, signs and wonders, bringing us to the place and giving us this land flowing with milk and honey, where I now bring the first fruits of the earth. So what's the connection between the harvest, gathering fruits, or gathering fruits of the land, and the history lesson? Why is a declaration of history bound up with agricultural ritual? Why recall Egypt while offering figs, grapes, pomegranates? So in his Guide of Perplexed, Maimonides, the medieval Torah scholar, says that this is a way for people to accustom themselves to being generous, and a means of limiting the human appetite for more consumption, not only of food, but of property. So this scholar, Maimonides, views this ritual as an antidote to materialism and overindulgence. In other words, the real test for our humanity comes not only in times of crisis and struggle, but even more in times of prosperity. It is easier to be moral when you don't have much. It is when you have more than you need that the challenge becomes bigger. When you have something, you understand the value of it for others. When you are comfortable, you have responsibility of helping others to become comfortable too. It seems to me this is what Maimonides means. This is why sharing the fruits of our labor is essential value for Maimonides. There is a deep connection between the harvest of fruits and memory. Agriculture has always been unpredictable. One year brings abundance, another famine. So too with history. One generation wanders in poverty, the next flourishes, and the next may be uprooted again. Life is uncertain, unstable, and often beyond our control. People plan, God laughs, as they say. Yet, it does not mean that we cannot change anything or make a difference. It is not a lesson of fatalism. We can use our blessings and our power to help others. Maimonides would agree that it is the commandment to do so. Would argue that this is a commandment to do so. So reflecting on similar thoughts, a German poet and novelist, Hermann Hesse, wrote in 1919 a letter to a young German, the following. And that was a time of economic crisis. It was a time of hardship in Germany. You write to me that you are in despair and don't know what to believe, what to hope. You don't know whether or not there is a God. You don't know whether or not life has any meaning, whether or not love of a country has a meaning, whether in the wretched condition of the world it is better to strive for spiritual goods or merely to fill your belly. I believe your state of mind and soul to be the right one. Not to know whether there is a God, not to know whether there is a good and evil, is far better than to know for sure. Uncertainty is not a weakness, but a necessary aspect of human experience. Questioning, doubting, and not knowing about God, good and evil, and ultimate meaning of love is better than having rigid certainties. The openness of not knowing keeps us humble, curious, and receptive to deeper truth that may unfold with time. Rather than clinging to dogma or easy answers, perhaps we can live with ambiguity and value the journey of inquiry over the comfort of fixed beliefs. What can be worse than not knowing the answers? Knowing all answers. We live in a world where people are often asked or forced to take sides. You are either pro or against. And many things seem to be black and white and really extremely polarized at the moment. This mindset leads to divided and clustered society. And there are many examples of such an attitude today. You are either pro-Palestinian or pro-Israeli, as if there are only two positions to take. The reality is more complex. As is often the case, all sides of this century-long conflict can be wrong, and all have some truth on their side too. If it were a simple situation, it would have been solved a long time ago. For example, yesterday there was a vote of recognition of the state of Palestine, and it might become a step towards hope and peace for the region, but we don't know that yet, because it can also lead to an increase of violence. The only thing I know for sure is this: not trying to bring peace is wrong. Not trying to build bridges and foundations for coexistence is not what we call leadership. Sorry for the double negative, by the way. If you have the blessing of prosperity, peace, and abundance, Torah seems to imply that it becomes your responsibility to think of those who don't. Despite many challenges, we have many blessings. We have resources, we have power and relative safety here in this country. Therefore, it is our responsibility to try to bring these blessings to other parts of the world. What gives people hope? Not the illusion of empty beliefs that the world will somehow be better soon. The hope is given by seeing examples of people who try to make it better. History is made by people who care. The famous phrase in Judaism comes from Rabbi Nachman. This this one. The whole world is a very narrow bridge, and the main thing is not to be consumed with fear. Right? כל העולם כולו, גשר צר מאוד, ועיקר לא להתפחד כלל. This verb, להתפחד, that was originally written by Nachman, I think it's best to be translated, not to be consumed with fear. We cannot solve every conflict, but we can refuse to give up on bringing peace. It takes few people to design and build a bridge, but then thousands and millions will be able to cross it. We must keep building bridges, even when they feel narrow and the crossing frightening. Uncertainty will always remain with us. Of course it will. Fear will always be real, but our tradition teaches that we walk this narrow bridge together. Let us walk and build it with kindness, humility, and hope. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.